welcome back. This week is going to be exciting. We are covering some of the existential questions: why we're here, what it all means, why do I believe that reincarnation is real, my memories of pre-incarnation, and why you would have chosen to incarnate on this planet, and how can this understanding impact your life so that you can live your most magnetic life.
I think what we maybe can start with is, where do we come from? Which is something
Fair.
that I think we keep asking since we're kids, you know?
Yeah. So remember, I'd first like to say a few things. One, I've had a lot of experiences, firsthand experiences. When I was a child, I remembered before I was born or when I was not in this body. I've had out-of-body experiences. I've had a near-death experience. I've spent years and decades. I've seen auras. I've experienced all these things firsthand. And because I was doing university level physics at like 8 years old, I've always had this intrinsic incentivization to try to figure out how to walk well in both worlds. How can science explain, or why is science not explaining that which I experience? So if you're skeptical because you haven't experienced these things, that's great. I don't think necessarily people should take my word for things, but I would invite you to be curious and open-minded, because I think it's a valid assumption that what we know about reality is one piece of a much larger puzzle. So where do we come from? And again, we're going to be using the words that I choose for metaphorical alignment. So I'm going to use the word consciousness. So we are all consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness is the non-physical particle or energy that creates, which we know, which science proves, creates what we experience as matter. Another way consciousness is often described is love, God, source, the universe. So when we are God, source, the universe, or consciousness in the non-physical, in the energy form, in sound forms, in different levels and dimensions, source itself, or consciousness itself, fragments into little individuated units of consciousness, if I use the terminology from NASA physicist Tom Campbell. And a lot of people would call that your soul. So your soul is a piece of consciousness. You are a droplet from the ocean of consciousness. So as a droplet of the ocean of consciousness, you are both an individual droplet, right? You're a droplet. You are your own drop. But you are also part of everything. And everything that exists within that ocean, parts of it exist within you. Another way to say this is people often say it's a holographic universe. And if you look at, do you remember, maybe you're too young, I don't know, did you ever have bookmarks that had the little holograms on them where you could like, woo, you could look at it and they become like a hologram, the different ways you look at it? So there are certain pieces of scientific equipment where when you cut a piece of one of those holograms, and now you have a tiny little shred of that hologram, boop, you can see this is it was a rainbow hologram of a unicorn. And you've got the little piece of the unicorn's horn. If you look deep within that particle, you can actually view the entire photo, the entire image within that tiny little piece of that hologram. That's very interesting. So that's another way to look at us. Or another way people say is as above, so below. If it exists within the consciousness, it exists within us. So it's sort of like if there is a particular component in that ocean and you are a drop of that ocean, you're your own drop, but you have components of what's in the ocean. but you might also have had other things that have, say we pour from here into here. Everything that's here will exist in here, but then this, we might stir with this. We might put in a different cup. We might put paper in there. We might add a little this to it. But all of these things that we're adding also come from here. So they're just different ways of putting that together. Another way to look at that would be that you and I are computers, right? Think of our vehicle of consciousness metaphor. We are in these little vehicles of consciousness. Everything's made of consciousness. Everything is made of consciousness. Everything is made of energy. We know that. That's good science. If everything is made of energy, what is energy? If energy is consciousness, everything is made of consciousness. So we are all from the same source, right? So if you and I are each computers, we are computers. That computer has its own software, yes? You could have totally different software than me on your computer. Some people's computers might run faster than others. Some might have 20 programs and some might have 5. The question we want to look at is, in some way, they all have the capacity to connect to the World Wide Web, where all of that information is. So everything that exists within your computer exists within the World Wide Web, because you are both uploading everything you do, because you're a part of that. You're contributing. Everything you do when you type into Google is contributing to the algorithm, yes? And what particular things you type in the algorithm determine which part of the World Wide Web you're going to download from. Does that make sense? So then you and I are computers that are made of consciousness that are uploading and downloading to the World Wide Web. We're all connected to the World Wide Web, but we're all also our own computers. But we're collectively co-creating what's in the World Wide Web. We're collectively co-creating what's happening down here. And we are individuals, yet we are all connected by the fabric of consciousness or love.
So does that computer capacity, following your metaphor, does it affect the ability to connect to the World Wide Web?
So some people like myself have a very fast fiber optic connection to the World Wide Web. Everybody's connected to it, but they might have a very slow dial-up connection, or they might not believe nobody told them there's a World Wide Web, so they think that all of the information they're getting is on their hard drive because they've never heard of a World Wide Web. So everybody's connected. It's just some of us are connected to very strongly. Some of us are not aware there's a World Wide Web. And some of us are connected to maybe darker parts of the web, which there's nothing wrong with. But again, it's like what you're typing in your browser. This would be the law of attraction. People say what you experience, what you think of. It's kind of like what you're typing in your browser on a regular basis over time. The algorithm learns to predict, it reflects back to you what you're typing in. If you're constantly typing in violent video games or, political news and gossip and negativity and things like that, what you get on your Facebook ads is going to be very different than what I get on my Facebook ads, but they'd all exist within the same web. Yes. So the thoughts we think, the words we choose, the actions we take, and the emotions that we feel and how connected our heart battery is. So again, if we go back to our vehicle of consciousness metaphor, the more in alignment we are, mind, body, spirit, our brain, our body, our emotions, and our heart battery, the more optimized those systems are, and the less fear and more love we are, the more authentic alignment we are, the less blind spots, the more integrated our parts are, the more we are going to naturally align with a part of the World Wide Web that we love. This is what people call manifestation or law of attraction. But I don't try to make that the goal. My goal with the magnetic masculinity blueprint is that you work on those things. That's going to be your natural outcome. And anybody can learn to connect to their intuition. Everybody is guided. Everybody is part of source. Everybody is a child of God. Pick your metaphor. So it's just that it's also, so if we use but you are the universe, you are God, and you are here creating. But if you don't know that and you don't understand, pardon me, how this quote unquote game is played, then you're going to be relying on your software that was installed before the age of 7, and you're not going to feel very empowered, and you're going to feel like a victim or feel like the universe is happening to you instead of for you, with you, and through you.
And with that ability to connect with the universe, is it in some ways, let's say as you're born, is it set in stone? How strong is that connection? Or is it something that can be affected by life experiences or upbringing or stuff like that?
Absolutely, you can change it. Now, some people are born differently. So, for instance, people like me that have very strongly developed what we call psychic skills or intuitive skills. That might be like somebody who's born like, oh, I can play the piano. They don't even have to take lessons. Somebody like me, I don't read music naturally. I took a lot of music lessons and I had to work really hard to be mediocre at it. Like maybe not even mediocre, maybe like still kind of subpar. But I didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't think it was that important to me, so I didn't work on it very long. Some people naturally just start to play the piano. So some people have different spiritual gifts. Some people are born just totally connected. Some people are very connected but don't know they're connected. A lot of scientists are very connected. A lot of sort of neurodivergent scientist types, 5 or 6 scientists in the world will download a similar idea at the same time for a technology breakthrough or a medical breakthrough or a science breakthrough. There's usually not only one person at the time because that information exists within the World Wide Web. But they would think, I thought of this idea, which on some level they did, but often people are downloading or channeling information that exists within the World Wide Web or the fabric of consciousness. The database, the ether, the Akashic records is what the New Age movement or metaphors would call it. The database, the fabric of consciousness, which is what modern physicists would call it. Yeah, does that answer your question? So you can learn it. Even some of my very logical, science-minded, left-brained, although left brain, right brain metaphors are a little bit outdated and inaccurate, but they're helpful because that's what people know, are sometimes asking me things now like, I think I had a psychic dream, help me. A lot of really high performers, C-suite executives, we work on all of the things we've worked on in the magnetic masculinity blueprint, but people are hungry for this. They want this. They want to know. We're starting to, so I get these executives that are like, help me connect to my intuitive abilities. Or, can you ever think of a time where you thought of somebody and you hadn't seen them for a long time, and then all of a sudden out of the blue, they message you?
Yep.
How do you think you do that? That information exists. Think how fast information can travel. You and I are on opposite sides of the planet. Yet here we are, you and I'm on a video, you're on a video. That information is zipping through the World Wide Web instantaneously in real time. I mean, come on, the world is a lot more interesting than we used to believe when we only believed in scientific materialism or Newtonian paradigms, or we had only religion. And never has there been a time when those two are more connected, where we're like, wait a minute, there is actually science that supports this. What does it all mean? And we're starting to really expand our consciousness, expand our awareness, and realize that the world, the universe is a lot more magical than we once believed, perhaps.
And so, talking about what you said about having an idea versus downloading it, I had a question. How do you know that there's a source of consciousness from your experiences or some of your background? Because I think that it would be valuable to hear some of your experiences for people who might not have experienced it, at least to hear some insights. So yeah, the question would be like, how do you know that there's such a thing as source of consciousness?
Okay, that's a great
Or
question.
World Wide
And I
Web?
could probably do 6 episodes of examples, to be honest, but I'll give you a few. When I was a child, I remembered other. I remembered me not being in this body. And I used to spend a lot of time thinking in childhood about like, that does not seem realistic to me, that this part of me that is watching me in this body, that's having this conversation, that's more than one me. That means there's more than one level. That means there's more than, and where is it that I remember being? I had a lot of anxiety and insomnia in childhood because I was I didn't fit in very much, and I was quite bullied because I talked about these things. I was like, do you know what happens when we die? Do you, the other kids were like, I'm trying to play Barbies. What's wrong with you? Shut up. Like, um, I was very mystical and very like, and also very intense. And I think, but very loving. And I experienced out of body travel. So I experienced being similar to the internet. I could perceive something in a different place without physically going to that place. I also saw what we would maybe refer to as auras, which means that I was perceiving slightly different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. We know that dogs do this, birds do this. We know that those parts, there's no scientific argument that those parts of the electromagnetic spectrum exist. And I think it's a logical assumption that a lot more than that exists that we don't even know about yet, because science is always evolving. Yes. So I think that's a reasonable assumption. So I think that a lot of neurodivergent people like myself, because our brain is developed differently, we are sometimes able to perceive different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are not typically what the part of the computer that somebody is using to interface in this third dimensional reality. I also used to see, I can sometimes do it still. I can see dots. So, when you look at a TV screen, before the picture comes clear and it's all kinds of colored dots, I can see that. So to me, when I learned in school that everything is not solid, it's made of energy that's moving, I was like, well, yeah. What did you think was happening? Because that's how I see it. I also experienced information that I did not read in a book. I just knew things. Well, how did I know them if I didn't learn them or be exposed to them? I also experienced what we would maybe call our higher self, which would be that droplet of the ocean of consciousness that is your soul, who is playing this sort of character of you in the game, your guardian angel, your higher self. I would sometimes hear very clear information that was very helpful and very accurate that would tell me things and remind me of things like, you're not from here. It's okay. You're just supposed to be a little girl right now. Just relax in your body. And I'd be like, oh, and all of a sudden I would relax and I would feel very comforted and settled. And I'd be like, okay, because I always had this understanding that I came here on purpose to live in this body. It never occurred. I never experienced what I have now learned a lot of people experience, that they think that they are their body. I've also had a near-death experience where I went back to not in my body. And when I got back into my body and decided it wasn't time to go yet, I could see ones and zeros everywhere, almost like computer programs. which is why I believe all of the modern scientists that say this is a simulation. Makes sense to me. I've also spent months at a time in different periods in my life, mostly in isolation and silent meditation. And when I'm in those states, all of a sudden, when all the noise and I close all the tabs in my browser, and all of a sudden and I get this sort of, my heart battery is so charged. My emotional navigation system is perfect. I'm grounded. I'm peaceful. I'm not working on myself by interacting with other people that allows us to become triggered, that allows us to heal. When I'm in those states, it's just like this constant flow of information. And I have lots of things in my life that I've learned intuitively. So if there wasn't a database somewhere, how did I learn those things? I've had those experiences that are undeniable for me. Right? They're just, to me, it's just normal. A lot of these things.
And speaking a bit more on incarnation, reincarnation. You mentioned that you kind of had to remind yourself that you chose to be here. So can you talk a bit more on that from like your experience, and also like what is the whole reincarnation? What is it? And what does it look like? What does it feel like? And what does it matter?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important question is, why does it matter? So if this is going to be helpful for you to navigate your life, pilot that vehicle of consciousness more skillfully because you understand more of the rules set in this simulation, game, incarnation, planet, reality, pick your metaphor, then I think that's helpful. I've also seen this information be unhelpful for people if they're then like, wait, I don't want to be here. I want to go back, or I want to evolve out of this back into something higher, or I want to become something higher. Remember that that is your baseline. You are consciousness. You are already perfect. You are already psychic. You are already telepathic. You're already evolved. You're already advanced on some levels. There's always room for growth. Even what we would refer to as archangels are still growing. The system itself is growing. We are the system. Yes. So I think it's important to remember that we chose to come from that to this physical form onto a planet that's currently in the emotional dark ages, which means there can be a lot of pain and struggle, especially when you don't remember that you're here incarnating for a reason. And you have to forget when you come here why you're coming here, because otherwise I'm using the word game lightly. I understand that can be very triggering, like, oh, this doesn't matter, it's just a game. No, this is important. You are here, you do matter. And right now you are physically incarnated. So it's not like, oh, it's just a game. I don't mean it in that sort of, that can be a very upsetting concept for people, I've learned, which I understand. But when you understand the rule set of why you came in here, you're more able to play the game. But if you knew you were here playing a game, or you knew you were here and you remembered that, you wouldn't actually make the same free will choices necessarily. And so think about, do you know what a Sims game is? This is a good metaphor I've heard. Okay, so Sims game is where you play all the characters of the game. You're the mommy, you're the daddy, you're the child. And on some level, Source is all of us playing the characters. But that's kind of boring. The Source consciousness is not going to grow. It's not going to learn. It's not going to understand and observe itself because it's still a singularity. So while we have all of Source or consciousness within us, we have to forget when we come here, or it wouldn't be a hero's journey. There wouldn't be, at least at that time. Now I think some of us are starting to remember, like I remembered, I was a little bit unplugged from the matrix, and there was some complications or some unusualities around my birth that might have impacted the way my brain works, which might be why I came a little unplugged you know, my brain was just different parts of my brain were activated than are typically being activated at this point in evolution. But we know through good neuroscience, we're barely accessing any of our brain. So the reason we forget when we come here is so that we can really experience the power or powerlessness of being in an avatar, being in this body, experiencing the taste of things. This is what 3D is about. We taste things, we touch things, we think a thought. Our brain, the supercomputer, says, okay, I'm going to help you experience that thought in the physical. We get to make things, think things, create podcasts together, get our heart broken, love. And not only is this an experience that's meant to have fun and be powerful and create, but we forgot. So it's not that fun for a lot of people, but it's also to grow and learn, because as you become self-aware and I become self-aware, source itself becomes self-aware, because you and I are source, consciousness, God, the universe, pick your metaphor. They're all valid.
I have a question that just got me curious. So if we all are the source, and source is where all of it is at, and we need to go through these experiences so the source can understand itself, like, why does it need to go through these experiences to actually understand itself? Doesn't it already understand itself?
It's a good question. Okay. From what I understand, and again, sometimes I find the human language a little bit clumsy. I remember telepathic communication when we were not in this particular version of source consciousness having experiences. And also when I download from the World Wide Web, I often get like a memory stick of information. Here you go, Astra. Bang. Imagine I gave you this entire magnetic masculinity blueprint in a zip drive. It would take you a long time to unpack it, put it through your human filter, and then figure out how to articulate it. That's why it took me years to sort of put all this together. So I sometimes find it awkward to communicate these really meta perspectives in our human language, but I'll do my best. And now I forget the question. Tell me the question again.
So if the source, like, why the source needs to have this experience to understand itself, like, doesn't it already know itself?
Let's imagine source as a singularity. Okay. And in order for source to understand anything, there has to be more than one. Right? A singularity is nothingness. A singularity is neutrality. A singularity is boring. It's suffering. So one might say source had a question, who am I? What am I? And that might be, I don't know. You can't perceive from a oneness. You need to perceive, right? And you need to be curious about, and you need to learn and grow and be curious and experience and have more than one perspective. So then let's maybe call that like a cell splitting, like everything as above, so below. If it happens on the macro, it happens on the micro. So a cell splitting, and then starting to come together and starting to form different things. Or the Big Bang Theory, just there it is, all these pieces of this particular part of source. And then those start to what? They start to form things. They start to learn. They start to create experiences. That would be much more fun, more interesting, more satisfying than just being a singularity of energy, not doing anything. Energy, by the very nature of energy, must move, yes? So should it always move as one giant singularity? That wouldn't make sense. And also from a perceiving point, if there is only one, that's suffering, that's loneliness, I can't understand myself. I don't know who I am until I look through the reflection of you. I look through the reflection of our listeners. I be curious. We need those different perspectives of source consciousness. Same as, so, okay, this is fun. You know, our episode on parts work, where we talked about how you have this part in perspective of you, and this part in perspective of you, and this part in your inner child, and your inner warrior, and your inner warrior. And some of them are unintegrated parts, and some of them are integrated parts, and some of them are divine parts, and some of them are rotten parts, and some of them are forgotten parts. And those parts help you understand yourself, yes?
Yeah.
You're a part of source, and I'm a part of source. We're just source's parts. And as I said, as above, so below. So what's true on the macro is true on the micro. So you are one part of source experiencing itself, having experiences and saying, wait, this is what I'm experiencing. This is how I feel. This is what this taught me. This is what that taught me. This is what I want. This is what I need. And within you, you have all these other little parts that make that quote unquote whole up. But are you really a whole, or are you a combination of parts? And are you yourself a part of a much greater whole? Just as your cells are part of, I have a bunch of cells, and I have a bunch of little energy particles that bounce around together and form together to make my eyeball. I have a bunch of other little parts that bounce around and group together to make my teeth, and they're experiencing their consciousness as a teeth, but it's all made out of consciousness. It's all made out of energy. Your energy, I'm energy, source's energy, but we're all parts of a much bigger whole.
Okay, so here we all are part of something that is, in some ways, it should be uniting us.
Yes.
Question would be like, why maybe don't we feel as united, or why there's so much, I don't want to say so much, but maybe we are exposed to a lot through like media and stuff like that, hate or dislike and conflicts and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Great. So I'll answer that from different levels. I'll answer that from a sort of source perspective, and I'll speak from that as a personal experience perspective. So if we're okay, so now we're Big Bang, we're all like separated. We're separated. And we're trying to figure out how to work together. So we could look at it from, we used to be this separated, and now we're only this separated. So we're on a trajectory to come back together. Or the expression that Tom Campbell would use is we're lowering entropy. There's a lot of entropy in the signal, which is a measure of chaos. Basically, it's not a super accurate description, but it's basically you could say you're a radio now. Now you're a radio, not a computer, and you're trying to connect to the World Wide Web to download a particular station. If you have a lot of entropy, it's going to be like you're not going to be able to get a clear signal to that channel. So we, as a large energy force, that's because the energy is in a state of entropy. We are in a state of entropy. We're not a super evolved species. We're a lot more evolved than we were. So we are coming back together. We forgot that we are all one. My company name is One Consciousness because I try to never forget. And when I've been in bliss or samadhi or enlightenment states or whatever word you want to give them, I don't care. I can feel my connection to everyone and everything. And after my head injury, I could visually see how everything was connected. But if you haven't had that experience, you're going to believe the illusion of separation, especially with how we've chosen to evolve with our free will, because the universe is not going to, it nudges us. It likes to remind us, it likes to give us clues and hints, but it's not going to interfere with our free will because we are source. And it wants to have that experience and that growth. So when we have conditions that we have right now, which are basically the emotional dark ages that I keep talking about, we're in that state. If you go back to our first couple of episodes of this podcast, you'll know what I'm talking about if that's interesting to you, where we have created this illusion of separation due to trying to fit in, right? We've confused love and belonging as the number one need of the human species. Why? that is both what causes our growth, because if we didn't desire to be around each other, we would never grow or learn, because we would never get triggered, we would never have experiences, and it wouldn't be very interesting to come to Earth School. But on the other hand, on some level, that love and belonging is because we feel on some level that wanting to be a part of is very literally in the fabric of our consciousness. But societally, in this third dimensional reality that we're living in these vehicles of consciousness in, we have created a lot of separation trying to fit in instead of celebrating the divinity of diversity. And we have a lot of programming around what's mine and what's yours. It's very binary. And polarities are one of the paradoxically amazing and horrible parts of this planet. So those polarities need to exist in order to understand one or the other. You wouldn't really be able to recognize love without its opposite or polarity, which is fear. And you wouldn't be able to have a journey to love and to wholeness if there was an absence of love or wholeness. You wouldn't know sadness from anger, you wouldn't know anything without some polarity. So the polarities on this planet are very helpful because it forces us to grow. It forces us to reduce entropy. But because we're not incarnating, remembering that, because we kind of need that in order for the game, again, I'm using that term, understanding that that's not always helpful or fair to say, nor totally accurate, it's just metaphor, that we need to forget that when we come in to play the game. Otherwise, yeah. But on some level, we're coming back out of that fear and entropy. We're lowering our entropy and becoming more love, less fear, more love, lower entropy, less separate, more together. But in order to have that experience of coming together, we have to start apart. And when people truly understand that everybody is a part of them, and you know that what you do to others, on some level, you're doing to yourself, even if you're self-centered at the time, which most of this planet is, because fear is self-centered. It's not you're bad. I don't think self-centered is bad. Self-centered itself can be very healthy or very unhealthy, helpful or unhelpful. But when we're in a state of high entropy or fear, we become very self-centered. And people call that the ego, which there's nothing wrong with. That's a fear mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. It's okay. I don't mind that at all. It's just information. All of it to me is just information that helps me assess where somebody is so I can help figure out how to get them where they want to be. But when we're in that state of fear, it creates a lot of me, and we go into the I am the droplet instead of I'm the droplet and the ocean. So the less part of the magnetic masculinity blueprint is naturally walking people through. That's why we do self-compassion. That's why we eat our shit sandwiches. That's why we do all those things. That is a journey from becoming less fear and more love. And then you're going to naturally perceive your connection to everything on some level. Even if at first it starts self-centered and intellectually, I have some clients that are like, oh, okay, I won't yell at that guy because I don't want it to come back to me. Okay, that's fine. I don't care the reason you're doing for it. You're practicing a new way. Whatever, everybody is pure source. Everybody is perfection. Everybody is worthy. Everybody has value, and everybody is connected to source. The rest is just software. The rest is just programming. The rest is just the rule set, your particular rule set of the game, which is why I don't mind if I work with narcissists, or what people call narcissists, which is just a shame disorder. I don't mind if somebody's a bully. I don't mind any of those things. Everybody is already divine source. Everybody is already love. Everybody already is good enough. Everybody already is perfect. Everybody already is all of those things. All we need to do is remove the software that no longer serves us, or, remove the delusions and distortions that help us remember our connection to everything. People often experience this through hallucinogenics or plant medicine. They'll take magic mushrooms or something, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I love everybody. Everybody is, which is why a lot of executives, a lot of people around the world are going and doing ayahuasca and things. And I think that's valid. And I think it can be a very helpful tool. I do those things. I've experienced those things in complete sobriety. And that's how I know they're true.
Can you talk a bit more on, are there any other places that we can reincarnate? And if so, how comes we chose Earth? Because some people might not, if they look at the Earth, they might not be happy with, if knowing that they might be potentially at other option.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it would be like, say you're a soul, and you're like, okay, two things. Choices are great because there's no time outside of this dimension. We're just doing this always forever. So if you just played the same game over and over and over and over and over, that'd be incredibly boring. And eventually you'd stop learning because you learn everything about that game. So from source perspective, it makes a lot of sense to have a lot of variety, right? Because there's nowhere to be.
Yeah.
There's only forever eternityness. And from a soul perspective, when you're up in source, you're not really up, when you're just not focused in this third dimensional reality, and everything is like love, and there's other little dimensions that maybe but people would call this heaven, okay? Heaven, people would call that. That's what they would call that in religion. Now, when I've experienced those states of heaven right here on earth, but I can connect to that source and I feel just, I've had tears pouring down my face, like weeping with the beauty and the bliss of feeling your source consciousness in every fiber of your being. And in those moments, I was like, I get it. I would go through everything I've been through for one more taste of that. And from a source perspective, when I was in those states and I was communicating, and I was like, why would anybody leave this to go there? Do you know how many times I've had my heart broken? Do you know how many times I didn't get as much money as I wanted? Or do you know how many, that person hurt my feelings? I was sad as a child. I was lonely. Why would anybody choose to come here when they could have that? And the answer that came to me was sort of a laughter. When I communicate with consciousness, it has quite a sense of humor. It doesn't take itself as seriously as we do. And it always reminds me that I'm ridiculous and to quit taking myself so seriously, and kind of laughs at me. I suspect that's why there's little anomalies on the planet, like socks going missing in the dryer. I think it might just be the universe having a little bit of a sense of humor, because my experience, it has a very jolly sense of humor. Where was I going with that?
The question was about the Earth and why did we come here?
So from that perspective, they said to me, when I said, why would anybody leave this perspective? Why would anybody come to Earth? It said, because if this was the only thing you ever felt, was this connection to everything, bliss, empowered, I am God, you are God, we're all God, everything is perfect state, over time, that itself would become nothingness or neutrality, because there is no contrast, no polarity. So would that be completely satisfying and rewarding for literally everness? Maybe not. Now, let's say now you're your soul, your individual unit of consciousness, your droplet of the ocean, your own little computer that's going to connect to the World Wide Web. Your soul wants to decide which school to go to. And you decide that based on which one is going to teach me the most about what I want to learn about. Yeah. And which one's going to be the most fun. That's kind of how you would think of going to a school, right? Doesn't mean you're not going to have late night studying. It's not going to mean that you know everything when you get there and you get everything you want at school. No, but you want to go from here to here. So Earth school is when it's not in such a state of high entropy. This planet's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And when you know you're connected to everybody, it's beautiful. You get to feel love. You get to feel sadness. You get to experience time. You get to experience time between thinking a thought, I want to make a podcast, and then going, maybe I should make a podcast. And then you get to experience the time, that intermittent reinforcement of creating in the physical as a God. When you're up there, everything's just perfect and all of those things all the time. And everything happens instantaneously. Great. It's like heaven. Oh, everything you want's right there. But I think that there's some value in that intermittent reinforcement. And it's also, hey, when I'm in physical form and I forget that I'm source, that's a really good rule set that the system can create for us to learn and grow and become more self-aware. Because, I mean, now a lot of people don't grow a lot in one incarnation, which is okay. There's no rush. There's nowhere to be, you know? But I think that, yeah, I think that I think it's valid to be like, why would anybody choose to come to this shithole? This place is awful. I'm in so much pain. Make it go away. I want to go back. That's valid. It's probably also information that you're not great at the game yet, which means you have more to work on, which means you probably would reincarnate because you're not very good at it yet. You're not graduated. And people here tend to think, I see this a lot in spirituality. They're like, I need to evolve out of this. Well, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is when you come to this planet, when you choose to come to this planet to help it evolve, and you know that you're in a game and you know how to play it, it gets really fun. And why wouldn't you? Because in the grand scheme of no time, it's literally like this. You know, it's like you and I sitting down doing a podcast. Hey, do you want to do this podcast? It might be hard. We're going to have to figure out titles for YouTube. We're going to have to figure out SEO and all these annoying things that are going to be frustrating that make me want to pull my hair out, which is why I think you're an angel. And, you know, and I have a lot of value to add, and you have a lot of value to add. And we put those together and something comes out of it that we created. So when you have that meta perspective, you have that more multidimensional thinking. You can zoom out, but here's what you don't want to do. We've talked about this before in our multidimensional episode, if you want to go back to that. Remember that you are a higher source. You are God, you are source, you're the universe, you are consciousness, and you are a droplet. And that droplet is playing a lot of different characters. So that droplet itself has the capacity to parallel process, quantum supercomputer, you know, maybe 11, I don't know the exact number, I'm making up a number, 11 parallel games it can kind of oversee, because each one of these 11 have their own free will. So you're just kind of giving them little nudges, little synchronicities. You're kind of looking at this one for a while, looking at that one for a while. Then, yeah.
What would you...
Oh, wait, I know what I was going to say. And that's so remembering that you are both source and your higher self and your 3D self. So how I used to bypass is something would happen to me in this physical 3D reality that I'm experiencing. And I'd be like, oh, well, I chose this. It's in my highest good. And I would invalidate my 3D human self, who was like, this hurts. You think I chose this? You're a jerk. Why would I choose this? So it's like, it's important to remember that this is an and reality. We don't want to we want to zoom out and look at things from a more meta, zoomed out perspective, but we don't want to abandon, invalidate, or bulldoze or gaslight the experiencer and how we're using this body to experience, and remembering that part of us is the body, and 3D is where it's at. You're already perfect. You're already evolved. You're already whatever. This is where the action is. And you chose to come here. So this is where it's important to be. So get grounded, get in your body. The most amazing magic that I've experienced on this planet is not when I'm like, I'm channeling and I'm up and I'm trying to get out of my body. All of those experiences for me have come as a consequence of really finally not escaping. I tend to be like a kind of, my soul kind of hangs outside my body. I'm like, oh, it's scary here. But when you fully get in your body and you experience and you ground into the third dimension and you create that, you are piloting. All of a sudden, the vehicle of consciousness isn't all the parts aren't all away, and it's not being piloted by a bunch of crazy parts. But you're like, whoa, okay, wait, I'm piloting, I'm in the vehicle. The vehicle is on the road to my authentic alignment. That's what you're here for. And that involves getting grounded, getting centered, not avoiding your human experience, not avoiding your human emotions, not bypassing and invalidating yourself by just skipping to higher perspectives and bypassing, but by embracing that every part of your human journey is divinity. It all has value. It's all information, and it's all perfect on some level.
Maybe to close off, I have a question on what would be your advice for all of us in this art school, if you have any.
Be kind to yourself. First, be kind to yourself. That doesn't mean excusing all of your BS excuses. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Remember that everything changes. Remember that you're not alone. Face your fears. And remember that none of this is permanent. And remember that you are powerful, you're a source, and so is everybody else. That radical compassion. And that radical compassion puts us in the state of love. That is the frequency of consciousness. That is how you get fiber optic connection to source. And if you're not in that, that's okay too. That means that you're on dial-up speed, or maybe somebody cut your cord, but that's okay. That's where how you know exactly and specifically where your work is. Follow your triggers, follow your fears, because that's your perfect information of knowing what part of you is still in fear that's causing more entropy in your signal. Speak to yourself kindly. You're a God. Speak to others kindly. You're both God. And remember that you're so much more than your body. You're already worthy. You wouldn't be here. You are quite literally a one of a kind, limited edition of source consciousness experiencing itself on Earth at the most exciting time Earth has seen in thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. If you didn't have value, you wouldn't be here. You're never alone. Your higher self is always with you, and you are love.
I love that. Anything else you want to add as we close off the incarnation episode?
No, I think if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those questions.
Any questions, really? Because I think this topic is so, I don't hear too much about it. So that's why, like, I would encourage anybody listening to ask questions if you have, because then we can address them. I can ask them to you and you can give answers.
Yeah.
Because it is something that I don't hear too much about.
Right. And to me, I'm like, it's just a normal part of my reality. So I have no idea how much other people do or don't know. Sometimes my journey has been like, oh, other people don't know that? That explains a lot, because I don't know what other people do and don't know. There's probably people looking at me going, oh, she doesn't know all these other things that I don't know yet. I don't know. I know enough to know I don't have a clue what I do and don't know. So I just stay curious, stay compassionate. Remember you're loved. Remember you're never alone. Remember you're amazing. And remember you have value. And if you follow this blueprint and you apply it in your life, over time, you're going to become less fear and more love. And when we go to look at the parts of us that are not yet developed, those parts are God too. Those parts are source. They just need a little mentorship, which is why we celebrate when we eat our shit sandwich, because we're training our brain to welcome our fear opportunities, because the less fear and more love we are, the less conditioned, the more authentically aligned we are, the more you're going to naturally have that connection to the World Wide Web. And yeah.
We'll see you next week.